Welcome to FUNC YOU UP, the podcast that gives you the best of functional medicine, nutrition, and wellness in 8 minutes or less.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to FUNC YOU UP. This is Michelle Miller, clinical nutritionist.
And this is Diana Orchant, functional medicine registered dietitian.
We are so excited today to have with us Dr. Patty DiBlasio, who is the functional medicine extraordinaire. She is going to be sharing a lot of information on an area I don't think we have a good amount of information about yet, which is not genetics, but genomics. So Dr. Patty, start us out with just what is genomics, what's genetics, what's genomics, and why is this important?
Well, I think we've all heard so much about genetics our whole life, and we know about chromosomes, and we know about certain diseases that often come as a result of our genetics, or at least think they do. Genomics is a little bit different. Genomics is little tiny pieces of our DNA, not large things like our chromosomes, but it's little tiny variants that each one of us has because we're so unique. And we call those SNPs, and you'll see the letters SNP. It stands for something called single nucleotide polymorphism. And you go, wow, that sounds pretty big. But all it means is that in your DNA, you have four letters. And if one of those letters is connected in a different way, or is doubled or missing, then you have what we call a variant. And we don't like to say it's like a big mutation. It's just a variant.
That could be offensive, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so some of these variants, though, make pathways in your body not work quite as well. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
So it's this idea of, it's not that something's completely messed up, but it's why you may be affected by certain things or maybe have a predisposition to certain things that others might not.
That's right. And I mean, it can affect things even like whether your eyes are brown or blue. That actually is a SNP variant. But it also can affect things like how well do you detox in your body when you get toxins from the air like we all do, or from our foods like we all do. And so we want to know, can we get rid of those appropriately? And if not, we may need some extra help. And this helps us to identify where we need the extra help and what we can do about it. So those variants aren't a death sentence. In fact, they're the key to good health and life for us for our whole life.
So this type of testing really opens up, instead of figuring out what might be wrong, it's actually opening a lot of doors to optimizing your nutrition, your lifestyle, and what's going to be best for you.
Absolutely. For example, once I did the test, I'd always wondered why I had so much trouble getting my vitamin D levels where they needed to be. And I would go out and sun and do all the things I was supposed to and try to take the supplements, but it seemed like nothing ever raised my vitamin D levels above a number that was pretty low. I realized that actually I don't absorb vitamin D from the sun very well. And the way I have to get over that is to take more of a vitamin D supplement in a form that I can tolerate. For me, I've learned my genetics, my genomics tells me it's got to be under my tongue in a liquid, and that I can tolerate, and it actually raises my level.
Such a simple thing that could make such a huge difference on your overall health.
Huge, because vitamin D, we know we've got to get our levels up, and it's hard enough to get it from the sun anyway. But because we have variants, that's going to make it even worse if we have that, and we can counter it so easily. So we're not a victim. We just put that ball in our court and we know what to do with it, and it makes a difference.
So this testing is newer. I mean, I know there's a lot of genetic testing out there that probably a lot of our listeners are familiar with, 23andMe, all these different, what is your genetic age? So I do want to differentiate between this type of testing versus that type of testing, and also get a sense of, if this is interesting to someone, what the experience of going through this testing, even looks like. I think when people hear genetic testing, sometimes they get nervous when it's really a very easy test to do.
It is. You just spit in a little tube, and I've done some tests like that before where you feel like you spit all day to get enough spit. This is real easy, just a little bit of spit. So that makes it good. And And yes, to your question about what this is, so this test is brand new. It's very cutting edge, and it is extremely research-based and 99+% effective and accurate. And that is very different than some of the other tests that have been out there. Some of the tests, like you said, they may just look at sort of your age based on a few things. There's some tests like 23andMe that really were made to be tests to check for ancestry. They weren't really tests to look at your own individual self. And so those tests often for your own individual self may be only as accurate as 70% or so, which means 3 out of 10 people are not getting correct information. They're great if we use them for what they were created for, maybe to help put you in touch with some of your long lost loved ones. But as far as wanting something really super accurate, that's what genomics does for you in this particular testing that we use with Intellect's DNA. And they have validated it in 2 ways. First, there's the test itself, that's the DNA test. And then secondly, what we call the PCR is also run to validate and bring it to the level it needs to be brought to of the over 99% accuracy.
So I feel like everyone right now is dying to do these genetic tests. And, you know, I think more commonly people are reaching for the genetic tests you can just buy on the shelf, like 23andMe. But really, I guess, who should be using Intellect's DNA testing?
Now, that's a great question. And I think the answer is everyone. In fact, Intellect's DNA is coming out with a test soon for children to look at autism and ADHD, mood and behavioral disorders. The sooner we can find out specifically about ourselves, the very much more benefit we're going to get from that, because we'll be able to use what we know to change our health to a good trajectory instead of just going along like it may be, having these risks, these variants, we don't address them, and then ultimately those genes can be turned on. What we want to do is realize we've got some risks, some variants. We're going to look at them, we're going to make the necessary adjustments, and then they won't be a risk for us any longer. So the earlier you do the test, the better. But also as you get older, you may find that you feel like this, that, or the other is causing you an issue, and maybe you're taking your blood pressure medicine or you're taking your diabetic medicine and it's not working. These tests can show you what you will benefit from in regard to certain medications like that as well, and save you the problem of maybe piling 2 or 3 drugs on top of each other to get the result that your regular primary care doctor wants. So we can look at it from a functional medicine and an individualistic approach as well.
I almost think of it as, you know, if you were flying a plane and you got a little bit off course, it doesn't seem like it's much. It could just be 1 degree off course, but after a while, it makes a big difference. And so everyone says, you know, where did the energy go when I was a kid? Or, you know, I used to be able to heal so fast when I was younger. Well, we know we only get older. So it is a way to kind of hack your efficiency, kind of just get to the optimal pathways and kind of utilize your body's biochemistry in the almost like the perfect way you can, just to be as efficient as possible.
It is, and I think one of the biggest things too is that some of the earlier genetics testing and even some of the earlier genomics testing in a little different fashion would pick 1 or 2 areas to look at. And you would get some information, for example, like your MTHFR, and you'd say, oh, wait a minute, that's my methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. I don't folate, I have a problem methylating, and so I've got a problem with my folate. I need methylfolate. Well, I learned that, and that made a lot of sense. And so all of us started giving everybody methylfolate because we think maybe as many as 25% of all people have that issue. And methylating simply just means it helps you to be able to detox better, and we all want that. However, if you don't put several small genomic SNPs together, you don't get the right picture. And so there may be other pathways you need to address that just addressing methylfolate won't actually take care of it. And I was very stunned to find that out and realize that it made sense. So it's very exciting to see this new cutting edge treatment that's been validated with research. And it's a true clinical tool for changing your life and your health. And it puts that back onto you. You're not a victim. It's not like, oh, yeah, you know, my whole family has high blood pressure, I'm going to get it too. It's like, no, wait a minute. Here is maybe why they've been more susceptible, but here's where you can intervene. So the sooner you take the test, the better.
Because that's one of the cool things about the test too, right? It not only tells you, you know, what SNPs you have and what areas need to be addressed, but also what to do about it.
Exactly. And it addresses it not only with supplements, but also with lifestyle. You can get some very specific food diets. So, you know, everyone's always out there trying to choose this eating plan, this diet, whatever. And we realize that actually there's some that are better for you than others. If you've got some Alzheimer's SNPs in your pathways, you want to take a look at that. And you may need a little different eating plan than someone else. And they're healthy plans. The same thing with exercise. I learned that one of the best things you can do to protect your cognition and memory is to exercise before you eat breakfast in the morning. A few little things like that, many of them are free, and yet they make all the difference in the world because it's all about you specifically and not about everyone else too.
And how often do we hear everyone else, I mean, everyone's saying, like, you know, this diet works for this person, so I'm going to try it, right? They see, everybody's so influenced these days about what they're seeing from other people, but in reality, they have their own set of DNA and different SNPs and variants and that they need to address. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed more.
I know, because like for me, I kept trying to do real strict ketogenic diets. That made so much sense to me. And I would just, after a few days, I would just crash. And I just couldn't understand it. So I just kept on and kept on because the science behind it made sense. But when I did my genomics and found out more about myself, it made perfect sense why that didn't work as well for me. And so what I've done now is what was recommended on my genomics was intermittent fasting. So about 3 to 4 days a week, I try to put about a 16-hour window, eating a little earlier dinner, a little later breakfast. And actually, I can feel so good in the morning. I can't even tell you, it's not like I feel bad, but I've been in a ketogenic state for a few hours, which we do know may have some benefits for us. So it's just wonderful when it can be highly specific for you. You don't waste a lot of time, energy, get discouraged, going down paths that probably aren't going to serve you as well just because they serve somebody else well.
And this is like a practitioner's dream also. I mean, it's great for the patient and the consumer, but it's also great for the practitioner because we don't have to waste time. There's no trial and error. We can really just zoom right into what we need to focus on, the exact type of nutrient or the exact type of diet. And I'd love to kind of walk our audience through, you know, what the test is like, you know, how they go about getting the results. And I think we've come up with a pretty cool way of allowing the results to be a little bit more digestible and practical too.
Exactly. Well, the test is very thorough when you get back your results. In fact, the practitioner gets about 100 pages of information about the patient and about ways that the patient can intervene. And so that's a lot of stuff. So the practitioner first has to go through it and see what are the areas where the patient is at greatest risk. And we begin to address those first. Now, there's some areas that are some risk, but not as great. So we start with the ones that are more valuable and more important. And then ultimately, over time, we can move through it. How do we make that something that then the patient can have? Well, the patient is released their version, which is still about 30 to 40 pages of stuff, but they're given a lot of great information, good handouts and all of that. And then what we've done at Physio Logic, which is, I think, probably, I don't know if this is done anywhere in the country, literally. We have partnered with our nutrition department, with Michelle, Diana, and several others, to make sure that we put this in bite-sized format for the patient. so they can see the red. That's the part they need to address. The yellow, we'll get there. And the green, there are some SNPs that we get on a patient that actually shows you that you've got some benefit there. Your body doing a good job, and that makes you feel good. And you want then to reinforce that and keep it going.
So when we first got our first report back, it was with our clinic owner, Dr. Rudy Gierman, and he's an open book. I won't share his findings on here, but I do want to just share the process that we went through because, you know, even getting back a 30-page summary can be a little overwhelming, even though he is pretty well versed in this field. So there were two things that we looked at. We paid attention to everything that came back kind of in the red, the more critical variants that we wanted to pay attention to, but also what were the things he was really worried about and concerned with, whether they be yellow, red, or green. So it's kind of first pulling all of that information and organizing it a bit. And Diana, maybe you can talk about some of the interesting things we found with a lot of the crossover similarities with a lot of the recommendations.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what we found is a lot of times what people come in, or at least Rudy came in saying what he wanted to improve, we could see some of that in his genetics. Like we were like, oh, this makes sense. And so for a simple example is that blueberries have so many wonderful properties. And so they were recommended in so many different categories, all different types of SNPs that had frankly, like almost nothing to do with each other. But then what we found is that we were able to figure out, okay, like blueberries need to be an essential part of his diet for multiple reasons. And we were able to break down why, but then also say, you know, make sure you're doing that every day. And that we did that across this whole spectrum. But it was super interesting to kind of see that all come together.
And easier for him to actually apply it to his real life. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a really fancy, complicated test. It only matters if the patient can go home and do something about it. But again, that's what I love about this test so much.
Yeah, I remember he said that he's always loved asparagus. And that was something that was really recommended for him. And, you know, food is medicine. And it's important often for us, we'll start eating just a few foods and we get really narrow with our foods. We like those foods and we eat all of those every day. But this helps to encourage you to say, oh, you know, you realize now, if you choose asparagus instead of a baked potato when you're out to eat or whatever, actually that's going to support your detox pathway. And you think, well, you know, that gives me a little more reason to make that choice sometimes.
It empowers the patient and a little bit more responsibility, a little bit more control over your health, which is a wonderful thing, and especially in a time like this.
Yes, it is. It very much is. I love the way the test is so safe for you to do as far as your privacy goes. And I know a lot of people are concerned about that because you've heard that, well, maybe you won't get life insurance because of that, or you know, is it really safe even with your health insurance? And although right now our laws protect that, you don't know if something like that could change. It's the same thing with disability. Disability has the right to sort of take a look. And so what Intellect DNA has done, it provides the patient a separate private portal for just their Intellect DNA genomic testing. And what that means is that that information is never put into the patient's chart unless the patient wants to give it to their doctor. Instead, it's kept completely separate. You don't have to worry that it'll ever be used against you. Plus, as soon as the patient receives their test and ships it back and the results come in, immediately I, as the provider, change the name so it can never be identified once the results are there. So it's a very safe way to do that testing, to get the information you need, but to know even if the worst thing in the world, somebody hacked in to that system, they would not be able to identify you. So it's very safe and private. And I like the way they've spent the time, the energy, and the money to make that happen for us.
And there really isn't any other testing available that's looking at genomics, looking at variants in this way, and certainly none that I know of that are taking as many safety precautions and steps to kind of protect our identity and our DNA.
Right, and this is a true clinic tool, is what it is, and that's what makes it so unique, in that the pathways that are given to you, and there's about 35 different categories, things like cardiac and detox and memory and cognition and blood pressure and obesity and macular degeneration and just et cetera, and they take those. They're within those 35 categories, you have all these variants, which are over 600 different variants. So you put all of that together, and that's what gives you that very special picture.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited about this test. We get excited every time we get a report in. It's kind of like a little puzzle that we get to put together. And, you know, knowing now that testing like this is available, that it's so specific, that it's so safe, that it's so accurate, it's kind of a no-brainer to me. I'm very excited to hear about the adolescent testing that's coming out. I think that will be a game changer for our pediatric patients. If people want to learn more about this test, more about you, where can they go to find that out?
So you could just call Physio Logic, let them know you're interested in getting more information about the genomics test. We can send you a little brochure that shows you more of the things that you're going to be learning. In what we do, we have 2 consults with me directly, 2 60-minute consults, and then we have 2 60-minute nutritional consults as well, so that once we see your genomics and we know this pathway actually makes a difference, and we know that the interventions we're going to give you are all research-based. With each category, there's usually about 100 different research citations. And so you know it's all going to make a difference. And so that's why we tie in the nutritional. It's integral, just like the consult I give, so that the patient is able to make all of it go together to work to make a difference. And that's what is exciting about it and what makes it so unique.
Absolutely. It's amazing that not only can the patient get all this information, but then they have such a wonderful resource to actually synthesize it all.
Yeah, I've got patients now that have been working through this for months, and they just continue to find more things about themselves. I do the same thing on myself. I'll come up with something or read something. I'll go, I wonder what it was on this, because you just can't remember all those 600 things. But you go back and you begin to look, and so you tweak it over time. And that's what's really wonderful about it too.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today, Dr. Patty. I'm just so excited for this new developing testing that's happening, how we can make our patients, you know, healthier, happier, faster. Diana, where should viewers that have any questions, listeners that have any questions from today's episode, where can they reach out with any questions or comments?
We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out to us via our Instagram at PhysiologicNYC or via email at funkyouup@physiologicnyc.com.
Perfect. Well, we hope to spread the word about genomic testing. And if you have a friend or a family member you think could benefit from listening to this, please pass on this episode, give us a like, or you know, even feel free to rate the podcast in general. We look forward to seeing you next time. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Patty.
You've been listening to Funk You Up. Be sure to like, review, and subscribe for more daily tips on living well.